In this video, we're going to show you how to install the upper control arm on your Cadillac Escalade, located right behind your front wheel. Process for the driver's side is the same as the passenger side. Using your pry tool, you want to go ahead and locate this little notch on the center cap. Pop it in there and remove the center cap. Once that's off, use your 22mm socket to loosen and remove the lug nuts. Remove the wheel and set it aside. On the back side right here, there's a 10mm bolt holding our front flex hose and our ABS wire. Just go ahead and loosen and remove this bolt. We're going to disconnect our level sensor rod from this plate that we just unbolted. Just going to use a trim tool and gently twist that and pop this off. It's just a ball-on socket. Pop that up out of the way. We're going to use our trim tool again on the side here and disconnect our ABS wire from this bracket. By doing this here, we have separated everything connected to our upper control arm so we can drop that suspension down without having anything bind. Now the upper ball joint here comes through the knuckle and goes to an 18mm nut on the bottom side. I want to go ahead and loosen this. We're going to use our box wrench here. Now, if you have a gear wrench, that'll be perfect. You can't really fit a ratchet in there because of the spacing between the CV axle. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and release the pry bar, and as I'm doing so, you can see the ball joint coming up and out of the knuckle. Go ahead and pivot that back a little bit, and that's going to allow us some access to our ball joint here. Now on our upper control arm, we have the two bolts that go through, and there's an alignment cam right here. Now there's a notch and there's a pin right here. I'm going to use our crayon, and I want to mark where that pin is, as well as the cam. That way there, when we install the bolts, we'll get a preliminary setting for our alignment. When you are done with this, you do need to get an alignment done anyways, but this will help get you down the road straight. Once we get this back one done, we're going to do the same for the front. Now we're ready to go ahead and remove our two bolts holding our upper control arm. The other thing you want to pay attention to is the position of this upper control arm. It's in a neutral ride height position right now, where it is snug with the bushings. I'm going to go ahead and use my crayon. I'm going to mark the frame here where the top of the control arm is. So when we install our new control arm and we snug those down, we're going to tighten them into that position there. And then before we do our final torquing, we'll go ahead and assemble everything, put the vehicle under its own ride height and weight, and then finish torquing. Using a 21 millimeter socket, let's go ahead and loosen the nut. Once we get this nut removed here, we'll do the same for the front. And we're just using our pry tool here to go ahead and remove our cams. Slide that off. Go ahead and work that bolt out from the back side here. And do the same for the rear. There we go. Got to remove that bolt and the inner cam. Grab the control arm and wiggle this out. Let's go ahead and work our control arm into place here. Now, if you're having a hard time getting this in, you can use a dead blow hammer. Go ahead and tap it in so you're not beating up your hands. Get that bolt pushed in. You want to make sure that you get your key lined up on the stud right here as well. So pop that in and push that bolt through. Let's go ahead and repeat this process for the back. Now on these cams here, there is a plastic unit right here, and there is a hole in it. Now this is a factory alignment setup. You don't have to keep this on there when you're doing this job. However, ours are in good condition. We're gonna go ahead and install these, and we're gonna line up that pin and do the same thing for the back. Either way, when you bring this in for an alignment, they're not gonna really need this there. So they'll probably pop that off and then set your alignment at that point. All right, we see both of our cams are on. I'm going to go ahead and get that nut started on that end. Let's go ahead and repeat for the back. Let's go ahead and get that nut installed here. Now, before we pulled out the other control arm, we did put a mark right here and a mark right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring our control arm up to about that position there, where the top of the arm matches up with our yellow marks. I'm going to go ahead and snug down our bolts. Now our bolt and cams moved a little bit, so what we're going to do is we're going to reposition these down to where it's supposed to be. Bring our control arm up to where that should be. I want to go ahead and snug this down. Let's go ahead and tighten down the front one. Now we lined up our upper control arm with those marks. We lined up our cams with the pins that we had marked previously. Now that we have our bolts snug, they're not super tight, but they're snug enough to hold this control arm stationary. We're going to go ahead and install our ball joint into our knuckle and assemble everything. We're not going to torque these two bolts down until the vehicle is under its own weight, where at that point we'll use our jack to compress our suspension to a neutral ride height. At that point, we'll then torque down those two bolts and then put our wheel on. You want to remove this plastic protective cover. Make sure your ABS wire is to the right of the control arm. Once that ball joint comes through the bottom side of the knuckle, go ahead and install the nut. If it's not poking through all the way yet, you can go ahead and use your mallet. Tap that in. Go ahead and snug that into position. Once the upper ball joint nut is secure, go ahead and lower your jack. We now install our bracket. Let's go ahead and snug down that bolt. Once that bolt bottoms out, just going to go ahead and snug that down gently. Don't want to over tighten it. So once that bottoms out, about a quarter of a turn, you can grab your level sensor rod here. I'm going to push this up in a position and go ahead and push that onto the socket. Might need a pair of pliers here to gently pop that into place. Okay. Sensor's connected. We'll go ahead and install this harness right here into this tab. Now at this point, let's go ahead and compress our suspension. You can use your jack under your control arm. We're going to compress our suspension just to the point where our vehicle starts coming off of our jack stands or lift. This is going to give us our compressed ride height. With that compressed, we can go ahead and torque down our bolts to 140 foot-pounds. Let's go ahead and do the same for the rear. With our control arm torqued, we can now lower our jack. Now you want to go ahead and torque the upper ball joint nut to 37 foot-pounds. Once you get to that 37 foot-pounds, you now want to do 90 degrees on that final torque spec. In our case here, we're going to use our wrench to get on in there and tighten that down. Go ahead and install your wheel. And let's get our lug nuts on. Let's go ahead and torque our lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds. Install a center cap, line that up, press it on.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.